You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project with your host, Rob Skiba.
All I'm offering is the truth.
Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and this evening I'm excited to be talking with my friend Chris Wheeler. Chris is a computer systems software engineer, and he owns a software company that focuses on automation and B2B AI, or bots. And he's somebody I met a number of years ago. We decided to get together. I don't remember how that even came about now that I think about it, but we were just going to have a lunch meeting to discuss research. And that meeting went very long, went right into dinner. And if I recall, I think we were there until they kicked us out because they had to shut the restaurant down. Anytime we get together, we tend to talk for a long time. I'm excited to talk for at least 2 hours this evening with Chris Wheeler. Chris, are you there, sir?
I am. Good to hear you, Rob.
Yeah, you too, man. How did that meeting come about? Did you contact me or did somebody introduce us?
I think I contacted you. I was living up in Indianapolis at the time, and I was going to fly down to Dallas. And I did, and we met for lunch. We met at 1 o'clock, and I remember it was about 9 o'clock when we stopped talking.
Yeah, they were trying to clean the tables and lock the doors. So I just gave a real brief bio there. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know you're a believer in Christ and follower in the Torah and all that kind of stuff. And give us a little bit of your testimony, if you would, and how you got into the career field that you're in. And then we'll segue from there into tonight's topic.
Well, my vocation has very little to do with what we're going to be talking about tonight. I kind of fell into what I do because I was a teenager and I wanted to play video games. And at the time, and I'm going to show my age a bit here, there wasn't an internet. There was something called a BBS system. And basically you'd go to Radio Shack and you would get a list of phone numbers. And on those phone numbers, it would say the BBS or the server that you could connect to. And of course, that was back in the days when we had long distance. And I would ask my mom to do extra chores, so she would let me log into a BBS, especially one in California, and I was in Arizona at the time. And that's how I got into computers. And I wanted to play games so bad that I learned programming at about 12 years old, and just kind of rewriting the games that were out there, like Lemmings and Donkey Kong, things like that. And so that's how I got into computers. I then turned that into a vocation later on in life as a consultant. I was a consultant for many years all over the world, working with primarily Fortune 1000, World 1000 and Fortune 500 companies doing system automation, systems management like that. So as far as my belief system, I was generally raised Protestant, kind of in the evangelical era. But I was a little bit disenchanted with this. I found some things in there that were more hype than truth. There was a lot of emotion being pushed on you back in the day. And I did my own discovery in my early 20s, as we, most people kind of find themselves and find out who they are and really do their God test. And that was kind of how I became a believer, was probably in my 20s.
Okay. And When was it that we met? Probably 4 or 5 years ago now.
I ended up moving down to Dallas. It's got to be like 5 or 6 actually. It's got to be a little longer than that.
Yeah, I would imagine, because I had just published my first book, Babylon Rising, which was, I think, the subject matter that we ended up talking about. But that went off into all kinds of different directions, and we've seen each other, occasionally at various meetings and Bible studies and different things like that. And then, it was about a month ago, a friend of ours invited us to a meeting that we went to, and we all went out to eat after that. And you're sitting next to me, and you're like, "So, what do you know about Q?" And of course, my first thought is, was it John Delancey? I think was it the actor
Star Trek.
On Star Trek, right? That's my first thought. But I had heard, rumors and different things about this person out there calling himself Q-Anon or whatever. So I was aware of that, but I didn't really know anything about it. And you talked my ear off for, at least an hour there. And I'm going, dude, we got to just do a radio show on this. I know there's probably a fair number of people in my audience that are more aware than I am, but let's just pretend all of us have no clue and kind of walk us through, your journey. How did you come to discover it? And what do you have to tell us about Q these days?
Well, I kind of happened onto this at the beginning. And when I say happened on is because I follow Poll. Poll is basically a politically incorrect forum where a lot of debate is had, or a lot of political conspiracies happen or are discussed, but never hit the news. So, and it's not all about politics. It's kind of alternative politics is what it really is. That's how I fell onto it. But let's back up a little bit, because there's going to be a lot of your listeners that will have no idea what Q is, or this phenomenon that's happening. And it's so enormous that we won't get into any detail about what's happening, but it should give some people some crumbs or something to latch onto and maybe do some research themselves. But if we go back to when we were kids, the first president that really, or as far as myself, that really kind of opened my eyes to politics was Reagan, right? I was around in the Carter years, but Carter was kind of he didn't make the news a whole lot, and there's not a whole lot that could be said that is very newsworthy about him so much. But Reagan really kind of had the country behind him, right? And it was this for God and country movement. And I don't know how much of that was real, but at least the people felt it was real. At least the people felt like our country is going the right direction. We're defeating the communists at the Cold War, and it was a big time for raising flags and hoopla and that kind of thing.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go on with Thatcher and how Thatcher warned Reagan about tearing down the wall, and she actually had a meeting with Gorbachev saying, "Don't do this. The Germans will take over." And if you study what's happened to Germany now, they've pretty much taken over the political, military, and financial sector of Europe. And I think, as much as I don't like Margaret Thatcher, I think she was right on that one. But it was really a for God and country thing. But since then, we really haven't felt that, but in minor little blips, right? So we felt it kind of after 9/11, but it really wasn't George W. that everybody was, rallying behind. It was more of the idea of, hey, we're going to get back at these people type of thing, right? So we had our flash of nationalism at that time, and we see it here and there, but we don't see it as like we did for years on end back in Reagan. And we're starting to see it now again in Trump, but for an entirely different reason, right? Reagan was really popular. His numbers weren't always great, but he was really popular. Nobody was really dogging him so much. But you move forward to Trump, and man, you just cannot find anybody on the news who is not dogging this guy 24/7. And so you have to look at that and say, like, what's really going on behind the scenes? Why is the entire mainstream media so anti this guy, right?
I haven't seen anything like it since Ron Paul.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And he is kind of libertarian in his own kind of capitalistic way, you know. And now I am not a big fan of getting behind presidents and doing all the hoopla. I'm really not.
Nor not.
Because I think that's, you know, Americans have a way of evangelizing their idea and portraying that into their leader on the left or on the right, right? And they kind of, you know, I don't know. It's almost like they deitize them for a little bit, you know, while they're in office or while they're fighting for office, you know.
He's the new Messiah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Obama, they're a perfect example of Messiah complex with the,
Holy
with the
cow.
people.
The media played that up every time they had an opportunity for a photo op. They always seemed to angle it such that there was something circular behind his head that would subliminally send a message of a halo. And I saw somebody created a meme like of just multiple times when this has happened. It's like, wow, are they trying to program us?
And they did. I mean, it was Obama is the greatest for 8 years straight, you know. Unless you might have caught on once in a while the Fox News. You know, Fox News has kind of always been the right wing. But I'm neither right nor left. And I'm not in the middle either. I'm more libertarian than anything, really. I believe that the Constitution is a phenomenal document, and it's probably the best document that's been written for a people to establish a country fairly outside of you know, using judges instead of kings, you know, in going back to, you know, the old school way of doing things. But to get back on topic here, Trump really wasn't supposed to win this presidency, and it was kind of obvious at the beginning. And so you've probably caught a lot of news about Russian collusion, right? That's a big thing going on, Russian collusion. And you have a bunch of players, and there's a lot of moving parts in this, right? You have an immense amount of movement as far as dossiers and documents and memos coming out, and the CIA on one hand, the FBI on the other hand, and who was in the wrong and this kind of thing, and it's all Trump bashing. And if you look at this from a larger point of view or farther out, you kind of see that, wow, this was a setup from the beginning. It was a what do we do if this guy actually wins? How do we get him out of power real quick? And what's the greatest way to impeach him, right? Okay, so the greatest way to impeach him is, hey, you're treasonous. You were colluding with the Russians and blah blah blah. If you study this, and this is one of those red pills, right? Whether you're right or left, it doesn't really matter. If you go down this little rabbit hole, you'll see that this man was absolutely set up and framed. And it didn't work. One of the reasons it didn't work is not only were they sloppy in what they were doing, but I think they took for granted military intelligence. So whether or not Roger Stone actually came to Trump and said, hey, run for office or not, I'm not sure. You know, there's a lot of speculation around that. There's a good argument for it, though. But here's a guy who really doesn't need to run for president, who's an outsider, comes in, and the military intelligence immediately becomes and befriends him, right? And that military intelligence has been the one that's been really uncovering all of the nastiness that's been thrown out at him via the CIA, FBI, the fake dossier, all of these things. And it goes back to what arm is behind a president, right? So for the last 3 or 4 presidents at least, we've had a president that's really been backed by the CIA, right? And it kind of starts with George Sr., right? Now, he was an old CIA guy. Trump actually is more like Reagan in which he's not he's not necessarily at odds with the CIA, but he's certainly not backed by the CIA, but he's definitely backed by the military arm, right? And he's been very verbal about, being pro-military. And he's very opposite of Obama. Obama, what did he fire, like 40 generals or something like that? I mean, he went crazy on getting rid of military generals, whereas Trump's kind of done the opposite. He's kind of brought him into the inner circle. So that's kind of one red pill that will kind of lead to Q, but it's a bigger thing than this. So follow me if you will. You have a guy that is recruited by military intelligence to run for office. He loses, runs again in 2016, and wins when no one really expected him to. They had I want to say like a trump card. Well, what if he wins? What do we do? And that was this: let's frame him for colluding with the Russians, which is obviously turned out to be false. And what we find out is the Obama and Clinton administration were actually colluding with the Russians. So it's exactly opposite of what they're pointing their finger at Trump to do. But here's a guy who is recruited by the military to come in, run for office. He is immediately attacked. But the question is why is military intelligence getting an outsider to run for office, right? Why are they not just going with status quo? And that's kind of the real red pill that Q is pushing off. Now, let me explain Q for a second. The mainstream media is controlled by a small group of financiers, right? So if you look at the ownership of most of mainstream media, it's going to lead back to about 6 people, right? It doesn't lead back to a whole lot. There's not like, sure you have, hundreds of media companies, but if you look at their ownership, you dice them down and you're really just talking about 6 people. And they're all pretty much very far left. Which seems kind of odd because media is a business like any other business. And what Trump has done with the tax cuts and other things, you would assume that from a financial point of view, they should be praising him. And yet you see the opposite, right? You actually see them lashing out over what he's doing. So the military intelligence grabs Trump, pulls him into office, gets him to run, and then needs to change the narrative because the narrative is owned by the media. This is kind of a psychological thing, but you are who you hang around with. You are who you listen to, right? If you tend to listen to right-wing radio programs, you're going to tend to vote right-wing. If you tend to listen to left-wing or liberal media, you're going to tend to vote that way and think that way. But this spawns out into, Facebook and Twitter. Those that you follow or those that you friend tend to think like you do, right? So it's just a sounding board. If you go to Facebook, you really either find a sounding board there for what you think, or you'll find the exact opposite, and the exact opposite is going to be attacks. But you're not going to find a whole lot of middle. This is by design. This is the way media works. You kind of go and you kind of hang around with people that are like-minded, right? Mm-hmm. What the military was seeing being done with this country was absolutely horrendous. And we'll get into a little bit of this, but it goes to the selling of American assets. It goes into the selling of uranium to terrorist states. All of these things which it saw happening, it wanted to expose. And so it needed to change the narrative. The military intelligence needs to get a control of, or at least a sounding board to the American public saying, listen, something very, very dark is happening here. And the patriots need to rise up and fight this because it's out of control. Well, Facebook, Twitter, the mainstream media are all shooting down and shadow banning posts that expose this, right? Now, stop me if you need me to explain some terms here, Rob, because I don't know if I'm moving too quickly.
Well, I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
If you're saying that Trump was effectively put into office by military, then is he a puppet of the military-industrial complex?
Helped into office via the military, backed by the military. Now, it's not necessarily military, it's the military intelligence, right? And it's by those in the military intelligence. Is he a puppet of them? No. So the relationship there is patriot to patriot. Like, we are both fighting on the same side and we want to root out evil. A puppet would be more like Obama, who is financially beholden or tied to people who support his cause, his foundation, a lot of money going under the table, that kind of thing. Look at the look at the Clinton Foundation, look at the Obama Foundation, and you can see why these people cannot necessarily speak with their own mouthpiece. They have to use, they have to say someone else's words, is because they're beholden to someone else, right? Financially. Trump is not financially tied to these guys, nor do they have anything on him that they can use as leverage. If you go back to, you can even find videos of him in the 80s, right? Now, I'm not saying Trump is a good man. I'm not. But what I am saying is that he's being used much in the way Cyrus was, as a servant of the Lord, right? He is being used by God. He's not a good man, but he is definitely not beholden to anybody else. He's that kid from Queens who had to fight, for what he got. Albeit he did have a wealthy father who helped him out quite a bit, but he's definitely not a puppet of the military, if that answers your question.
Okay. All right. So they're instrumental in getting him into office. And meanwhile, it seems to me there's a like a civil war going on between the alphabet soup organizations, NSA, CIA, FBI. In fact, they're even mentioning that in the new X-Files. If you've been watching the season 11 X-Files, they've been actually talking about that. So military intelligence, I guess, would be the military version of the alphabet soup companies.
Yeah, but it's the thought process of military. So military is forgotten country, right? The military thought process is we follow the leader. We support the Constitution. We will fight for the betterment of our country. Now, some of that is quite naive, right? You can see the last few wars we have, and you can see, we definitely weren't fighting for God and country. We were going to steal oil, blah, blah, blah.
That's not the choice of the military. The military is just following the orders of the government.
Exactly, yeah. But it's more structured and it's definitely more patriotic. Mm-hmm. NSA is kind of that question mark. So let me tell you why. The head of the NSA actually met with Trump the day before they moved out. Where were they? At Trump Tower at the time, because he told Trump, "Look, you're being spied on by the FBI illegally, right?" The FISA warrant came in later, right? And the reason the FISA warrant came in later is because they could retroactively go back. But that's now coming out that what they were doing was absolutely illegal. And this should raise some huge red flags in everybody, because we believe and we hold to the fact that our privacy is absolutely private, and that no one can listen in on our personal conversations without a warrant, right? Without there being some reason to tap, right? Mm-hmm. And that's important. I mean, read 1984 for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. If you don't put this in place, pretty soon you have thought police and you're not even allowed to think without it, right? So our conversation should be private, and that's something that we hold very dear, and that's why it's very against the law. This is why Nixon got kicked out of office. I mean, this is huge. This is massive. So the head of the NSA comes to Trump, lets him know you're being spied on. He immediately moves out, or then moves to Trump Tower, I believe. That's what started this whole thing that's going on right now in the news as far as the dossier, the memo, and all of those moving parts. But that's only one small portion of what's going on.
Now, let me just, I don't want to derail your thought process, but there's politics is so far off my radar, dude. Like, I don't have a clue what's going on anywhere, and I don't frankly care. But you mentioned the memo, and I have seen lots of stuff going around on Facebook. Haven't really read any of it, haven't watched any of it. So I'm a complete newbie to that. What is the memo, and what's the importance of it?
Okay. If you're not into politics, it's not a big deal, right? But definitely be into your rights.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because this affects your rights, right? Politics are politics. This is a little bit bigger, but it's being muddied with politics. So there's two memos, really. One was written by Nunez, who basically wrote saying, look, what I found out that the FBI was doing was so shocking and wrong that it was definitely breaking the law. The Democrats tried to block that from being evidence to the public, and they weren't able to block it, and so they rewrote their own memo, which was nothing but garbage, and still has not been 100% redacted. It's still somewhat redacted because too much information is in there, but that's the memo.
Okay, hold that thought. We'll come back and talk some more after the break. And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and this evening I am talking with my guest, Chris Wheeler. And right before the break, we were talking about the memo. What did the memo actually expose, and why is it such a big deal that everybody's, buzzing about it?
What it exposed, and it was kind of already known before it was laid out in the public, but what it exposed was that the FBI was illegally listening in and grabbing emails from the Trump team, from the Trump administration, that it had no right to get. In other words, it was monitoring phone calls and electronic communication that it didn't have the rights for. The reason why they had that, they're coming back and saying, yes, we had the rights, is because they had what's called a FISA warrant, right? Basically, a FISA warrant allows you, you're not allowed to tap into or monitor an American on American soil, right? You're allowed to listen to, you're allowed to tap into and wiretap a foreigner on American soil, but not an American. We have those rights. We're, as citizens, the Constitution protects us from this.
Yeah, but didn't the Patriot Act nullify all of that?
No. Okay, so the Patriot Act did a lot of bad stuff, but we still have those rights as citizens, right? Now, there is something called a second hop and a third hop. I'm not going to go into that, but what the FBI was doing was they were wiretapping Trump's administration without the proper warrant, and the warrant they got was on false means. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because we can get lost going down the memo and all of this stuff as far as
isn't some of that being dropped by a Q anyway?
Yeah, so eventually we'll get to Q. So
I want to spend most of the show on Q. I'm just trying to get enough of a background so that I can, and other people can track with what's going on here that aren't familiar with all of this.
Well, one of the reasons this whole subject is so muddy is because who controls the conversation, right? The mainstream media controls the conversation. Walk into any airport and you have CNN blaring at you. There's not any airport that I've ever been into in the States that plays any other news channel but CNN. Right. And it's so far left and it's so far anti-Trump, right? So if you're going to control the narrative, if you're going to control the conversation, you have to start a grassroots movement. Okay. So who does the military intel reach out to start this grassroots movement? To wake them up and say, hey, something really, really bad, and I haven't gotten into the bad stuff yet, something really, really bad is happening in your country, and we have to clean it out, right? We have to, and then, Trump's words, drain the swamp. Mm-hmm. And it goes way beyond politics. So in comes a guy named, and when I say a guy, I mean a handle named Q. So earlier I was talking to you about a BBS boards, right? And so prior to the internet, you had to log into a server to be able to play games or download stuff.
BBS board, that was just the old bulletin board.
Bulletin board system is what it was.
Right.
Well, back in the day when we had bulletin board systems, there was a Japanese bulletin board system that predominantly did discussions and hentai, right? Hentai is kind of like a weird cartoon thing. It's all Japanese culture or something. And then that bulletin board system grew into it morphed and evolved into several different things, and got shut down several times and revived. When the internet came around, it revived in what I'll generically term as chans, right? As the channels. You have 2chan and 4chan. Later you had what's called 8chan. So these bulletin board systems, really what they started off was as image boards, right? And they're still kind of known as image boards, but they're more discussion boards now. And in there, if you're familiar with Reddit, right? Reddit kind of follows the same sort of path. Is that you have topics or you have boards that are limited to a certain topic, right? And so if you wanted to find a board about the Old Testament, let's say, you could find a board about that on Reddit or I don't know if the Chans have something like that, but this is where Q reached out to, was into poll, right? Poll being alternative politics. Basically saying, hey, I have some information for you, and I need to have a discussion here. I want to wake you guys up. There's something going really awry with our government. And the deep state, right? It's the cabal, the people that are behind everything. The true puppet masters. The Chans are not really friendly to newcomers. And so they will vet you out, and they will make sure you are who you say you are, because they're not looking for newcomers. Right? It's a very strange place. Facebook, you want friends. On the Chans, they don't want you. And another thing about these boards is that everyone's anonymous, right? You're not required to have a username, and you don't log in per se. You can have full conversations, and everybody is known under the same name, anonymous. Once in a while, you can identify yourself through a password if you wanted to. But this guy signs everything as Q. And they vet him out and ask for proof, and he shows proof as needed. For instance, he showed many pictures inside the White House after everyone was gone and things like that. And, the pen on the desk of President Trump's in the Oval Office, showing that, yes, he is in the inner circle and he was vetted out. And sure enough, he is who he said he is.
Yeah, no, I heard some of that vetting is like, okay, prove it, show this at, whether it was New Year's or whatever. So, some kind of significant time where, okay, what's going on now? And
the hallway on Christmas Eve at night, right? Yeah. Or the fireplace at a certain time. Yeah. And he was able to provide the proof that was necessary.
So he's definitely a very, very inside person.
Absolutely. And he's proven that multiple times. He was asked to, early on, have Donald Trump tweet certain things, and then he did. So, I mean, there was multiple occasions where he could show, yes, I'm on that inner circle. Now,
He is an inner circle person, or do you think he might be Trump himself?
no one knows. It's good possibility that he is more than one person, as the authorship sometimes changes in the way he dialogues. So he could be Trump at times, and he could be, some of the staff at times. No one knows. Okay. It's all signed Q. Now, I'm going to drop a few data points here just so your listeners can do a little bit of research. I would highly, highly suggest you stay out of the chans. Highly suggest it. If you're not in the chans already, there's no need to go there. But there is some good discussion points on Reddit. There's it started with Calm Before the Storm, right? So it was started it's what's known as the storm, and then you had the Calm Before the Storm. So the Reddit, the subreddit that you're looking for is CBTS, or Calm Before the Storm. So CBTS _stream. So CBTS _stream is really talking points about what Q is saying on the chans, is really what that is. Okay.
Now, isn't there, who is it, Jerome Corsi or somebody out there that's been kind of
correct?
People out there summarizing what the latest and greatest on Q lately.
So Jerome Corsi goes above and beyond, and once you start reading the talking points on CBTS stream, you'll start noticing Corsi's. He gets on. I can't even think of the name of it now. It's basically a chat stream for gamers. I'll think of it in a second. And he also has live YouTube channels that he'll discuss drops as they come, right? A Q drop is he's posted something online, if that makes sense, right? So look up Jerome Corsi. Jerome Corsi is a great author, and he really is a good speaker. Even in his live commentary, where he kind of discusses the Q drop and what it means. Now, understand a Q drop can be very obfuscated, for lack of a better word, to where you really have to try to figure out what he's saying, and you may not ever figure it out because he may not be speaking to the people that are the public. A lot of times he's speaking directly to military personnel, and so it's hard to decipher sometimes, purposefully hard to decipher. And so Jerome Corsi holds a channel, Discourse. There's the word. He holds once in a while he'll get on Discourse and start going through, and then he'll open a live YouTube stream for discussion on the Q drops. So. But what are the Q drops? What I really want to get into is not so much who is Q, but I kind of want to give your listeners like a little wake up of what Q is saying, because this is where it really, the rubber hits the road. So,
okay,
what is going on the surface? You see all of this stuff about Russian collusion, but why do they want power so badly that they want to remove Trump from power? And that's because of the dirty laundry that's going on backstage. And it involves, if you want to look into Uranium One, in which we find that the Clinton Foundation is heavily vested and was heavily vested in selling U.S. uranium to North Korea. Now, this is like, mind blowing. Like, why in the world would we sell our uranium to North Korea, right? go down this rabbit hole, and it'll take you a while, but all of the facts are there, and that will be investigated. And a lot of Q drops or early on Q drops were about uranium-1 and what was going on there. And it goes deeper into something called Project Pelican, which was hasn't been vetted out to be fact yet. So that's something that's a rabbit hole that's still being, researched, but that was also selling uranium via a cargo company down in Florida to Iran, Pakistan, and North Korea. It also goes into the SpaceX stuff and how SpaceX was able to go from, Elon Musk selling cars to, now he's doing phenomenal stuff with rockets. And it was the stealing of NASA contracts and stealing of NASA secrets and giving them over to SpaceX with money under the table. So really just.
So Pelican's part also explains Elon Musk?
It goes into that a little bit because of why that is being shipped to where it's being shipped to. So uranium-1, the whole uranium-1 is tied into the Project Pelican and is tied into SpaceX.
SpaceX. Yeah, I don't want to derail on that, but yeah, there's a roadster head to Mars. Whatever.
Well, I'm not worried about what is or is saying that we're doing or we're not doing. What I'm worried about is why is our uranium leaving this country and going to terrorist states?
Right? Third world countries.
And who's getting paid for this, right?
Yeah.
And where is the money going, right? Why are we finding billions and billions and billions of dollars missing? And where are these contracts going and how are they granted and who's getting paid under the table for these contracts? This should wake up people. This should be like, wait a second, this is treasonous here. This is insane. What is going on? And we can go to a darker pill if you'd like to go to a darker pill, unless you've got any questions about what we've gone through so far.
Oh, no, keep going.
Okay. So I want you to think for a second that you're, Hillary Clinton or Nancy Pelosi or somebody like this, right? You're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And put Trump into this bucket too, because you have to weigh things out. Why are they running for office? Why do they want to, go through the grind every day, and going to work and writing bills and doing all this stuff, right? So in the back of our mind, we want to say because they want to serve our country, right? So the question, yeah, or rule it. So the question is okay, have they served our country? Then that's a huge question. Have these people served our country? Did George W. Bush or George H. Bush, did either one of them serve our country? Did Clinton serve our country? Did Obama serve our country? Did Hillary, when she was Secretary of State or any other thing that she was, did she ever serve our country? Or did they serve themselves, right? And to what end did they serve themselves? And if you start looking at how they're serving themselves, you'll start answering a lot of questions about uranium-1 and where that money was going. And if you look into the Clinton Foundation, you'll start seeing how much dirty money was there. But again, you have to ask yourself why. Look, Rob, if I gave you $100 million, wouldn't you just go on vacation for a really long time? Enjoy your wife, go see Monaco? What would you do?
I'd make a really cool science fiction series, seasons.
You would, but you would enjoy life, right?
For sure.
And you would do for others. And we're not seeing that from the leaders that we've had prior, right? We're not seeing that at all. We're finally seeing that in Trump. A little bit, right? There's got to be some self-serving there, but we're not seeing that self-serving as blatant as we're seeing in the last 4 presidents that we've had. But we've noticed that they're all tied with these little organizations, or they fund these organizations, or somewhere their fingers are involved in organizations that claim to stamp out AIDS or help feed the children, or you name the great cause, right? And as you look into these organizations, you start seeing a fingerprint, and you start seeing that there's massive amounts of human trafficking going on throughout the world via these organizations. Mm-hmm. And this pill is hard to swallow, but this is something that Q's been adamant about, and the patriots on the Chans have been adamant about, stamping this out, exposing this, shedding the light on this. But the amount of human trafficking that's happening right now is absolutely mind-blowing. And your brain's not going to want to go where we're going to go in the discussion next, but most of this is child trafficking. Mm-hmm. And it gets really the evil involved in this, and the evil of what these people in power are doing and what they're involved in is just out of control. I mean, it's almost to the point of you don't want to talk about it because you lose a bit of yourself if you do. You know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Enter in something called adrenochrome. Okay? Adrenochrome is a drug that is harvested from the base of the brain, right up to where your brainstem reaches your spinal cord. It's triggered. Your body releases adrenochrome in a form that is triggered through trauma, but not just any trauma, through like death type trauma. Mm-hmm. And we're now seeing this drug being moved throughout these organizations, and it's the same organizations that, hang on a second, where did all those kids from Haiti go? Hang on a second, where's all the Syrian kids and the organizations that were involved in there? Just a month ago, the Russians caught the Red Cross dragging $1 billion in cash, $1 billion in cash across the border into Syria. Something is going on that is so dark and horrible. And that is the real war that is happening on our soil right now. And I have to bring it back to Trump and military intelligence, because they're the ones that are fighting that war, but that war is not being spoken about because it's so dark. It's hard to shed the light on this one. The whole, Russian collusion and all that stuff going on is nothing compared to what's really happening in the world right now. And there is a fight of good versus evil right now that everybody needs to be involved in. Everybody. Because it's way too important, and we cannot let these people win. We cannot let this continue to happen, because this is just it's insanity. It really is. I mean, it's beyond that.
Yeah. Okay, so how much is Q dropping on these things, and what's the benefit of looking into it?
So his go back to why he started conversations in the Chans in the first place, is to wake people up and get the conversation started, and then B, tell others and wake them up, right? And that has been his push from day one. Expose people, turn on the light where there's darkness. Show the world what's going on, because we cannot allow this to happen any longer. Because as long as it's dark and as long as it's not exposed and as long as it's shoved under the covers, this stuff will continue to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But once we expose the truth, once we expose people and get the conversation started, then things start to happen. Everything happens with words first. And that's really what Q's big push is from the beginning is, hey, find out about this, look into this, dive deep into this, expose this, tell your friends, wake everybody up, speak, 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 because the more we speak, the more people look at it. And if we don't speak, the news certainly is not going to do it, because the news is in on it and wants to cover it up as well.
It's just, some of the stuff I post about 9/11 or vaccines or chemtrails or pick a subject. There's always that person. What's the why are you even doing this? What can we do about it? What's there's always this big question about why even post this stuff. And my response is always the same, and is exactly what you just said. First thing before change can ever happen, you have to admit that there's a problem to begin with.
Yeah.
Once you can acknowledge that there is a problem, then you can start figuring out a plan to take care of that problem. But when you still got people in 2017 still believing the official story of 9/11, we've got some work to do. When you got people look up in the sky and think a crisscross grid is normal, or pumping your body full of toxic chemicals is actually a cure for a diseased body, we've got work to do. So you're saying that that's what Q's function is right now, is to be that person that is on the inside, that sees things that are really happening, and just pumping the information out so other people like Jerome Corsi or you or anybody else can start digging and searching and be agents for change. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And then the primary cause is to become a discussionary point, right? To tell others, to open your mouth, to speak out against it, right? So, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Interesting, you mentioned a few things like chemtrails and big pharma. I think it was just a couple days ago, Q did some drops on big pharma. Not sure what those will come out to be, but basically it had messages going to big pharma or back and forth, and the message is received, and we'll see what happens. But just prior to that, Q answers questions too, sometimes. And the discussion was about cancer research and how many cures have actually been found, but not released by big pharma. And so he recently made a few drops about, hey, we are going to push this out, and I'm using my own words here, but we are going to push big pharma into releasing the cures. Because what they're doing is they're making money on death. They're making money on keeping people alive but sick.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We are TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, for the second hour of the broadcast. I'm talking with my guest, Chris Wheeler, and we're discussing Q, this individual out who's out there on these internet message boards, and he's trying to wake people up, trying to make them aware of what's going on, get the conversation started. Right before the break, we were discussing issues of big pharma, that it's really just there to keep people alive, but sick. And I would go on and add to that dependent. They're going to continue to give you more pharmacia that will cause more problems, that will require more pharmacia until they've made you bankrupt and miserable and worse off than you were when you went in, until you're finally dead. Not a good thing. And you're saying, or were you hinting at that Q is aware of this and trying to do something about it?
Well, treat the symptoms, not the cause, is really what big pharma is all about. And not just that, hey, they're making money on the sick, but release the cures. Release the cures was kind of the big push there. So we'll see. He said that a message went back and forth. We'll see what that message was. A lot of what Q says you don't find out for several days or weeks. So, wait and see on that one.
What about, one of the biggest culprits out there is Monsanto. Has anything been discussed in the Q world about putting an end to that corporate tyranny?
So not by Q himself or herself or themselves, whatever Q is, but a lot of discussion has gone around in those boards around companies like Monsanto. There's a lot of evil companies out there that we would say, Acme evil company. Monsanto would certainly fit the picture on that. So there's been a lot of discussion around that, but not by Q themselves.
Well, so when we were initially going to have this show, I think 2 weeks ago, and then something happened, couldn't work out, and we were waiting for something to drop real big, I think over a weekend or whatever. And then last week we were scheduled to go, and I couldn't get my Skype to work, like literally 2 minutes before we were on the air. I had to make a decision just to, can it and do a rerun. What has happened since we had that lunch together with Brian and Melissa, when you were first telling me about all this, what has happened in the world of Q that has really caught your attention?
Well, one of the reasons we postponed it was because of the Nunez memo. And I didn't want to go on not knowing what that memo said, because so much of the political chatter at the time was revolving around the Nunez memo. What has happened since then? I don't know if it was before or after that you had the missile alarm in Hawaii.
It was before that. There was the
Hawaii
deal, because I went to Hawaii last year. My family was celebrating multiple anniversaries. My parents' 50th, my sister's 20th, and Sheila and I having our 10th. So my parents paid for us to go on a cruise to Hawaii, and I just finally decided to post pictures of it. And I had no clue. Like I said, I don't watch what's going on in the news. So I posted this thing on Hawaii, and some people thought that I was actually in Hawaii and asking me if I was afraid or if I knew anything about the missile. And I'm going, what the heck are you talking about? Yeah. Of course, I later found out, but you were talking about that quite a bit, actually, at our lunch meeting. So why don't you go there? What was the deal with that missile situation and the data that was supposedly there in Hawaii?
Well, some of this is going to be a little bit of speculation because not all of the data has come out yet, but it looks like that wasn't a mistake, but that there was an imminent threat to the NSA in Hawaii at the time, and a missile had been shot down. So it wasn't that, we made a mistake and pushed the wrong button, but there was an actual imminent threat. There was several tour boats that were off the island that saw something being shot down in the sky. So you have first account reports of this, and you also had a lot of chatter about that at the same time. This ties into a little bit with the meteorite stuff that was going on over Michigan, I believe it was at the time, in which you had these tungsten rods that actually took out some bunkers up in Michigan, and then it kind of was being tossed off as, oh, that was a weird meteor that blew up in the sky type thing. This was all around that same time, so something was happening in the military, and I think you have an internal war going on, and that internal war could involve foreign entities, but it's primarily between the alphabet soup in our country right now.
Well, you had let's just call it a theory that you were telling me about, that if this is in fact a Trump orchestrated deal, there are certain things that he's not privileged to unless XYZ happens. And so, okay, let's create XYZ, and then all of a sudden things are possible now. Okay.
So this is just theory. I want to make sure that everybody's clear on that. This is just a theory.
This is pure speculation.
100%. Okay. There's a level of top secret that's above the president, and that the president can't read unless certain events happen. At the time, this was prior to the Nunez memo, and this was still getting into what data was being shared by whom and being paid for by whom, which has since come out. But that the Hillary Foundation was paying for the Steele dossier that was coming out via Fusion GPS. So you have a threat to the NSA data center. You got to remember where Snowden was prior to moving to Russia, right? Where did Snowden work for the NSA? He worked out of Hawaii, out of that data center. The backup for that data center, I believe, is in Utah, but that data doesn't necessarily flow unless you're looking at imminent danger between the two. So it may not be a true live backup, right? So it may not be redundant data centers. It may actually be redundancy elsewhere, but these two being isolated data centers that would only back up to each other in an imminent threat. The missile comes through to Hawaii trying to take out that particular data center, and the data that's there was the data from the Asian Pacific area. And the president then could only get access to that data if that data was in imminent danger. And so the backup happened to the lower 48, and the president then had authorization or clearance. So what the chatter prior to that missile was that there was going to be one. That was the thing. And then you have that missile warning, and then all of a sudden you have Trump now holding more data than he had before. So it was almost like the clowns or the cabal, the CIA, wanted to take out, I'm going to say the deep state, wanted to take out that data center. Military intelligence knew about it, allowed them to try to take it out in order for that backup to the lower 48. So some of that data could be declassified. And then, does it make sense? I know it's very colluded.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be that, or it could be whoever they are, that wants things to happen. Let's say they want the president to have access to information that he can't get otherwise. So they orchestrate, if we're talking military, then our own military launches a missile that our own military takes out. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, NSA over in Hawaii goes, "Oh crap! There's a missile coming to us. Let's do a dump so we can retain the information. Whoever survives to the lower 48." And then once it's there, everybody's happy because Trump got what he needed and the military wanted him to have in the first place.
So people say that Trump plays 4D chess, right? In other words, it's way beyond 3D chess. It's 4D chess. But I don't believe it's all Trump. In fact, I think Trump is getting a little bit too much credit for what the military intelligence is actually doing. I think it's the military intelligence that's playing 4D chess. And I think there are true patriots there that are doing God's work and doing the country's work and trying to root out this evil. I don't necessarily think it was the military shooting at the military. I think it could have been the Chinese being paid for by the clowns or by the cabal to shoot off a missile. And I think a lot more of this stuff is happening. In fact, just today, might have been today or yesterday, a drop by Q was a single line, and it just said September 7th, 1776. That was the entire drop, which is normal to be kind of like, okay, well, what does that mean? He makes you go research and go find out for yourself. If you look up September 7th, 1776, that was the day the very first submarine attack happened, right? Huh. So it's sub to sub or sub to ship, right? It was the first submarine attack. So why is he mentioning that? Well, throughout the last week or so, a lot of the chatter has been using the word Red October. So something's going on in the oceans that we're not aware of. We're purposely not aware of, but we're given hints that, look, some stuff is happening. Just trust the plan. Just know that what we're doing is good and right, and keep telling and keep researching and keep shedding light on this.
So Q is dropping things so that people like you and I are having conversations like we're having right now.
Yes. Let me give you an instance. Let me read off a Q, right? A Q drop. Okay. Here it is. This was dropped today. They are always watching. Watch the news regarding new drugs coming out. Flu, dirt. Next. What a coincidence. Q. Right? Flu. That's the entire drop. What is he talking about there? Right? You could go 1,000 different ways with this, but what does it really do? It starts a conversation about big pharma and, hey, let's look for new drugs coming out and see why new drugs are coming out, that kind of thing, and be leery of those new drugs coming out.
Well, yeah, and stuff being, dirt, what comes out of dirt, our food, flu. I'm telling you, man, when I went location scouting for seed, I had very limited human contact. I was out in the desert by myself, going through mountains and places to find cool locations for seed. So I'm out there with limited human contact in the desert. The sky that particular day was crisscross grid of chemtrails, just really nasty. And late that night, I am hacking my brains out. I've got a fever. I've got the flu for like 3 days, and am only now, a month later, getting over the cough that was generated from that. So when I hear what you just read right there, I'm going, okay, drop, flu, dirt, we're being poisoned. That's where I would go with it.
Absolutely, we're being poisoned. Earlier we talked about big pharma and what exactly was being pressed on about big pharma. Just tonight, and when I say just tonight, I mean probably within the last hour or two, Q drops again about big pharma, right? Earlier the drop was about a message sent and response forthcoming, right, about big pharma and that kind of stuff. He just dropped this within the last hour or two, and here it is. Did Hussein receive a letter in the mail with white powder? Hussein being Obama's, right? What a coincidence. Message received, response forthcoming, Q. Right? Well, what does that mean? It means that something's going on with the powers that be and the military intelligence, to where they're trying to root this stuff out. And if you don't think that that this goes all the way to the seat of the last administration, you're kidding yourself, right? Because all of this is rooted in the Clinton Foundation and the Obama White House, and it's so ingrained in so many people that are still in power. We really have a war going on in our country. Let me read you another tweet that came out today. And this is not a tweet, but a drop. Where are the tweets from Hillary Rodham Clinton, BC, CC, Hussein, and others regarding the shooting today? Mm-hmm. Do you believe in all capital letters evil? Make no mistake, they will all pay the price. Again, all capital letters Q.
I'll ask you what you thought about that, because I went to my office earlier today to pick something up, and they've got these big screen TVs, and there's a really big common area in the first floor, and all of the monitors were showing some recent shooting, I guess today, in Florida, and it said, 17 dead, shooter had AR-15 and multiple magazines, blah, 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 blah. My first thought is, oh, brother, here we go again. So he dropped something on that today?
Yeah, I just read it to you, and that was what he put out, right, is where are all the tweets from HRC, BC, CC, Hussein, and others regarding the shooting today? Do you believe in evil? Make no mistake, they will all pay the price. So when he said they will all, he's talking about the Clinton, the Obama, that kind of stuff. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, that kind of stuff. He's saying they are directly responsible for this. When it comes to like the news of the day, like the shocking news of the day, for instance, the shooting today at that high school, I try to wait a couple days before forming an opinion, because what I notice is that first reports don't always add up to a couple days later reports. And then I try to compare the two to see if the later reports are trying to cover up what they had said on the first reports, or if more information was just gathered and they were able to get their story a little more accurate, because you'll have one of the other. Look at 9/11. You had your first reports, and then several days later you had other reports and they didn't match up. And what you saw was the later reports were trying to cover up what they had said in an emotional state on the first reports. And that's why the second reports don't add up. So the first reports were more accurate. But you see this in like school shootings or the news of the day that is shocking. You'll see the first reports and then the later reports, add those up and try to make the dots and see, are they trying to cover up the first reports, or have they just gotten more data and now the reporting is more accurate? And it's usually one of the two. So as far as the shooting today goes in with that high school, I don't know. A lot of people are saying a lot about it, but I try to hold my tongue for a couple days just so I can see what actually pans out.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is it's either another false flag crisis actor deal, or it is pure evil, being like that it was premeditated, planned, and orchestrated, not by the individual who did the shooting, but somebody who put them there to do that. Either way, I don't believe it's just some random dude that you had angst and, posted bad stuff on social media and decided to go kill a bunch of people.
What's weird about school shootings is majority of the time it's a younger individual, and they're usually on some sort of
antidepressant kind of.
Yes, it's crazy. The connection there cannot be ignored.
Exactly.
And the other thing is you'll always see anti-gun legislation.
Well, that's the purpose of it.
Talk about it. Q just dropped, by the way, just while we were talking. So 2 posts. First one says, watch the water, whatever that means. And then the second post is actually just just telling another anonymous user that he's done great work. So
what's to prevent somebody from posing as Q just to send everybody in crazy thought paths that could be dead ends or, rabbit trails or whatever?
One would think that's an easy task. It's actually not. And that's the beauty of being anonymous. Again, on these boards, everyone is anonymous. By the way, if you are, I can't stress this enough. If you're not already on the Chans, do not go become part of this now. It's not for the weak-hearted. I'll say that. You have to have really thick skin, and you're not really wanted there. So there's other places that your work is great or needed, and a lot of that is in social media or in the streams on Reddit and that kind of thing. But in the Chans, everybody is anonymous, so you are not required in any way to identify yourself. So you will post something, and if you follow me with Facebook, you post something on Facebook and then somebody comments on it, right? And it'll be underneath your post. And then let's say another person comments on their comment will be under the second person's comment, right? So you can follow in a linear path a conversation, right? It's fairly easy on Facebook or Twitter or that kind of thing. That's not the way these work. Nobody is identified, right? Everybody has the same exact name. So you have to figure out who is talking to who and about what through a series of post numbers, right? And that's usually a 6-digit code that says this is the post I'm referring to. So you have to constantly follow these numbers, and you have to go up and down, and a lot of times you have to go to other pages just to figure out one post and who they're talking to, right?
That's why guys like Jerome Corsi and some of these other Reddit threads are easier for the novice, the newbie.
Yes.
Because they're just going to latch on to one of the drops you just did.
It's confusing. It's purposefully confusing. It's not going to be updated to be easy ever. That's not the point of it. The point is to keep those people out that have no business being there. Does that make sense? This is not for the noob. Then if you do identify yourself, you put in a password, and that password is hashed. And that's what's called a trip code. That trip code was at one point actually it was hacked when Q was posting on 4chan, which is why he moved over to 8chan. And it's now, which has much better hashing there. So it can't be reversed. Your trip code cannot be reversed and then figured out what you put in as far as your password goes. So the guys on the Chans, if his account was hacked, they would know it within 10 minutes. No question.
So there's no way somebody can take his username, Q-Anon or whatever. And
let me give you a story about who you're dealing with on the Chans. Okay, a lot of these people are ex-military. A lot of these people are ex-intelligence. They're almost all patriots, especially on the boards that Q posts on. And they don't muck around. This is serious business for them. There was a guy named he did the Transformers, Shia LaBeouf, right? You know who that actor is, right?
Yeah.
Trump wins the election. He decides to put up a flag saying "Not my president," right? In a museum, right? And he posts this, and then it gets on Poll. Poll is one of the boards and Chans. And the guys were just like, no, this ain't going to happen. And they broke into the museum within 24 hours, took the flag down, and put up a Kek flag. Kek, by the way, is short for Kekistani. It's the mascot of Poll. Hard to explain, but it's a frog head. In other words, it's saying, don't mess around with us, is basically what the symbol was. He then decides that he's going to put it up somewhere else at another museum, and he does. And within 24 hours, that museum was broken into, and they put up the Kek flag again. Shia LaBeouf rants on Twitter and rants on his webpage about how they'll never stop me, blah, blah, blah. So he puts up his live stream of a camera showing his flag, and all it shows is the sky, a very, very small portion of the sky. Most of the camera was just showing the flag. Now, they take it. These guys, they call themselves autistics. Okay, so they're the autists got together and decided, okay, he's trying to show us up. We're not going to let this happen. You can imagine you're seeing a live stream of nothing but a flag and the sky behind it. Okay, no buildings, no nothing, and it says he's not our president. Okay, within 24 hours, they had found where that flag was and took it down. They did it by tracking flights as they would see an airplane go over. They did it by tracking migratory birds and figuring out what birds were in what area at the time. They figured it out by once they figured out the flight patterns, then they started tracing and started looking and saying, okay, that's got to be flight da-da-da-da-da.
Hold on.
It was amazing. Sure.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
You're listening to Truth Frequency Radio.
We are TFR.
Back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. For the final half-hour segment of the broadcast, I'm talking with my guest, Chris Wheeler. And right before the break, we're talking about this Hollywood actor, Shia What's-His-Face, hanging flags around that he's not my president. And this last one, he apparently had a camera tight on a flag, so all you see is a little bit of sky and the flag, and they found him.
The autists, yes. the Anons. So yeah, this is such a good story, and it really shows who Pol is and who the Kekistanis are. Understand it's a whole culture in and of itself, but these guys wouldn't put up with this. They were not going to put up with someone who wasn't going to support a free election, which was really the whole reason. And Shia LaBeouf was throwing his little tantrum and doing the whole, he's not my president thing. Where we left off, flag, camera just shooting at the sky. They had they say, oh, hey, there goes a plane by. Can somebody, look at flight logs and try to, trace back this plane, that kind of thing. Not flight logs, but real-time flight tracking. They had figured it out and got it down to a square mile. One of the Anons who lived in the area got into his car, drove around honking his horn. Let me know when you hear my horn. I do. Within 24 hours, they had found the flag in the middle of a field in Tennessee, took it down, and put the Kek flag back up. Yeah, amazing. This is who you're messing with. So he does it again. I can't believe he didn't get it after that. Just give up at this point, right? He doesn't. He decides to take his flag and puts it up again with just a camera showing the sky and the flag. 24 hours later, less than that, it was gone again. And this time he had done it somewhere in the middle of Manchester, England, I believe. But amazing stuff. This is who these guys are that Q is talking to, and Q is asking to wake up the rest of the world and giving drops to and saying, look, do your research, be the patriot that we know that you are. And it's not all about patriotism. A lot of it is about fighting evil. He will drop Bible verses here and there. just to, because a lot of these people are very religious and very Christian, and hey, look, this is a very deep, dark evil, and you have to have some sort of faith to go down this path, because it does get, and we touched on it a little bit with adrenochrome, and the children being harvested for adrenochrome and for these just awful, awful things. And that's really what Q's mission is to wake up the world and to change the narrative and hopefully get the people riled up enough to where they wake up, get off the television, stop watching football, and actually do something to help their fellow man.
Mm. So I want to circle back around to the discussion with the missile in Hawaii. So we have all this data that somebody wants access to, President Trump or the military, whatever, intelligence. It's in NSA lockup on Hawaii, on the islands of Hawaii. And so a missile is launched which then forces a data dump to the lower 48, and the missile is taken out. The information is now in the continental United States. So somebody got what they wanted there, and it was, I think, shortly after that we had this tungsten rods thing happen. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, okay, so preface that with, this is just a theory.
Okay, we're back to theory mode. Okay.
This is just a theory. This is not necessarily this is just speculation at this point. The data may already been here, but maybe it gets unlocked because I can't imagine that amount of data being able to transfer across the pond that quickly. Being in IT, I know how fast that stuff goes, and it doesn't matter how big of a pipe you have and the amount of data the NSA has. I can't imagine it being in real time shoved over. So maybe it's just unlocked. But if you look at these tungsten rods that were being fired down, and there's several pictures online, it's the same time that the meteor flash happened, right? And that was kind of on the news for a bit, and everybody's like, "Oh, I saw this big flash in the sky, and had to have been, a meteor or something." On that same night, people caught missiles firing into the ground, or what they thought were missiles firing into the ground in Michigan. And the research that came out of that was that they weren't necessarily missiles as we know it, but more of an advanced stage missile, to where it's primarily this just gigantic tungsten rod with explosive in it that is so heavy, tungsten, right? Such a heavy metal, goes deep underground and then blows up, and you can see the explosions coming from the ground up after these rods go down into the ground. It's amazing pictures. This is all tied into somehow what was happening in Hawaii at the same time.
So this happened at the same time, or very shortly thereafter?
Really short. When I say at the same time, I mean within the same few days, right there.
Okay. The speculation then is that there was some deep underground military bases that were needing to be taken out.
So they were what came out of that were there were strongholds that were being taken out. So there were these underground bunkers. And I can't remember who owned them. Someone did a lot of research in who actually owned these bunkers, but they were private. They weren't government owned. They were private owned bunkers deep underground that they were being taken out.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. But what's amazing is this kind of stuff is happening on a weekly basis, but nobody knows about it, right? So unless you're in tune with the pulse of like what's going on with Q and what's going on with these drops, because what he's done, and I'm using the term he loosely because I don't know if it's a he, could be a she or a they. What he's done is give people some insight into military intel that they've never had before. Because he'll tell you stuff is happening. Like I read you the drop tonight that said, watch the water. watch the water is going to be definitely tied to yesterday's drop when he said September 7th, 1776, which is the first submarine attack. It either has to do with that or it has to do with Big Pharma, because he also dropped yesterday about Big Pharma and the message received about Barack Obama receiving the envelope of white paper, right? So when it says watch the water, what is he talking about? Is he talking about the submarine attack that we should be looking out for? Or are we talking about somebody dropping something in the water and tainting the water, right? It just makes you keener to pay attention to what's going on so you can be part of the discussion and make that discussion a little bit more vocal than, just in your own little home. Bring it out to the what is that phrase about the water dispenser at an office? You know what I'm talking about?
To bring it to the water cooler.
Yeah, bring it to the water cooler. Bring it to, start sharing this information and get more people involved in he's not giving information that is classified or can be deciphered easily that would put anybody in jeopardy. He's giving out information that starts a conversation, and he's constantly saying future proves past, future proves past. What he means by that is what you hear in the news tomorrow, I told you about today, right? The future proves that the past, your little drop, was a clue to you. So I highly suggest that, in your free time, in anybody's free time, they just do a little bit of research and just join in on this discussion. If nothing else, if we could stop the human trafficking that's going on, and if we could stop the dirty laundry of money that's going back and forth, and if we could put an end to a lot of this, I think that we've won a big battle,
Well, in order to get to that point, first we have to make people, they have to become aware of it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because I think about it all the time. I think there's so many things that I would love to see change, but if I go out and try to do it myself, I'm either going to end up dead or locked up in a cell somewhere for the rest of my life, But, if there's 300 million of us,
Well, guess
I'm always
what?
thinking about that in the numbers,
Yeah.
Where we have 300 million people in the United States being run by, a few hundred to a few thousand at the most Luciferians, many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it never computes in my mind. Like I remember even as a kid watching like the 10 Commandments, right? And you see 2 million Jews being subjugated by, a few dozen guys with whips, and they have backhoes and they're working, and I'm going, okay, you guys have backhoes. That guy's got a whip. You got way more people. Drives me nuts. So I'm like, we gotta have the numbers in order to do anything.
Yeah, as a kid, my mom was really into this miniseries called Roots. I was really young at the time, and I really don't remember it, but I definitely remember asking my mom, Mom, why don't the slaves just grab the whip and beat him? I didn't understand, It's kind of the same thing. What's amazing about this whole movement is we are actually winning the war. It's amazing. Last year, the year before, you were just oppressed. You were just like, oh, this is too large. This is too big. There's no way. This is really the end times. This is getting bad, and it's just going to get worse. There is a glimmer of hope here. We're actually winning the war. We're actually making progress. These people are afraid. These people are hiding. These people are now very, very, very worried about what's going to happen. What Trump did in Saudi Arabia and all of those and what that new prince did to all of his siblings and cousins and so forth by jailing him, that was huge. And a lot of that was Trump's working. What's happening on a global level is really, really good. Not all of it, but we're winning the war. We're stopping a lot of this evil from happening. And I'm just going to throw this out there because it has to be mentioned. But the fact that Trump went to Israel and declared, or I'm sorry, didn't go to Israel. His UN secretary or his UN, our UN consulate, went up before the UN and claimed Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel was huge. I mean, this is huge. Why everybody wasn't talking about this, about what this really means prophetically? It's massive. You got to remember, you can't have a temple unless you have a Cyrus. You can't. Right? Cyrus wasn't a great man. He was a great king, by the way. He was a great ruler. What he did and what Darius did as far as being able to conquer and then tax the people and control that way was phenomenal. I mean, unheard of. Cyrus was a great king. He wasn't necessarily a good man, but he was a great king. And we wouldn't have had the temple if it wasn't for Cyrus. And again, we're not going to have the temple in Jerusalem again without a Cyrus. And it's very well possible that Trump is aligning himself to be the servant of God. Again, I can't stress enough, not necessarily a good man, but a servant of God.
Well, any temple that shows up there prior to the Messiah showing up isn't going to be a good one. So I'm not overly excited about Israel putting up a temple right now.
But it has to happen. You and I know that it has to happen.
There's definitely prophetic scriptures talking about, somebody doing things in the holy place and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Now, whether it's at the city of David or whether it's somewhere else, unknown.
Now, that would really capture my attention. If they just say, forget the Temple Mount, it doesn't have anything to do with our temple anyway, and they do something in the city of David, then I'm going to be like, oh, okay. Something to really pay attention to.
Yeah, I was just talking to Daniel last night about this. Daniel, for those listening, a good friend of Rob and I's, and he was saying, he who studies the Torah and the Bible immensely, he was talking about just a few months ago, they had actually found the altar from the time of David in the city of David. They had dug down that deep. Amazing stuff that's happening over there right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So we got 10 minutes left in the broadcast. What would you say people should be paying attention to? Where should they go to find out more information? And if you're willing to answer questions, any information you want to give in that regard?
Sure. So the best way is first to inform yourself on what's going on. And there's a lot of topics that we hit tonight. We hit on politics. We hit on the selling of American resources, especially uranium. We hit on iridium a little bit and the SpaceX program and how the stealing of contracts and the negotiations under the table. All of those things are surface level to what's really going on, and that's there is a huge problem with human trafficking, and it's something that no one is exposing until now. So I would definitely say that to get involved, research for yourself what's going on here. Some good places to do it is to look at the stream on Reddit. So Reddit is a kind of a post board, kind of like a message board, image board. It's reddit.com, Reddit. In Reddit, you have something called subreddits. And the subreddit you're looking for is called CBTS, as in Charlie Bravo T. I don't know what T is. Tom. S as in Sam _stream. So CBTS _stream. That subreddit talks about nothing but Q drops and what's going on in the world today as far as the political, and there's a lot of stuff on stopping the child trafficking on that stream itself. Another good way is to look up a guy named Dr. Jerome Corsi. Dr. Jerome Corsi has written books, but his latest efforts has really been on YouTube and doing live streaming and talking about the Q drops and trying to decipher what's being talked about and said. So those two resources will definitely get you started. once you get into those, especially the Reddit streams, you'll figure out where to go from there.
Mm. And is there any way for people to contact you?
Sure. Yeah. Email is probably the best. You spell my name with a K, and it's Chris, Kris, at mydogischoking.com.
Okay, so what's the story behind that?
That's a long story. There was
9 minutes.
Okay, I'll make it short. There was a time in early days back when we were still using Lycos and Yahoo for searching, right? Prior to Google, to where Yahoo and ICQ were the predominant chat sources, and I needed a username quick. I couldn't come up with one that hadn't been used, and on my desk was a picture of me petting a dog, but it looks like I'm actually choking the dog to death because its tongue is hanging out. So I immediately thought, oh, my dog is choking, and I used that as a username. That was probably 15 or more years ago. I still have that username. That's actually a website as well. I don't post on there very often, only because I haven't had a whole lot of time. But if you want to learn about ancient history, just go to mydogischoking.com. There's a few videos on that up there, and then also my YouTube channel, which is My Dog is Choking. But again, what I post on those two places has nothing to do with what we're talking tonight. That's really just a hobby of mine to talk about ancient history, predominantly Mesopotamia and that kind of period.
Yeah, we probably need to do a show just on that. That was what how our relationship started in the first place, was tracking down similar paths.
Yes. We have some agreements and some disagreements in there. Yeah, that would be a good discussion.
That keeps it colorful and interesting.
But we can't do it for 9 hours like we did the last time or whatever.
We can't do that. So maybe in the last 6 minutes, what was the most intriguing thing that you found by following this Q business?
I think I didn't realize there was such a massive war between military intelligence and the CIA. But there's a huge war between those two.
No, well, yeah, I mean, the CIA is responsible for starting so many of the wars the military has had to go fight. Yeah. You know, I've got a book here, Legacy of Ashes. It's the history of the CIA by Tim Weiner. And I got this a while back, and just reading through it, like, holy cow, man. That's pretty crazy what they're responsible for.
Yeah, really all of the dirty stuff in our country since JFK and on is CIA. I mean, it's absolutely, all of the dirty stuff we can trace back to those guys.
But there's stuff coming out with the FBI too, and NSA and some of these other ones.
Yeah. So the FBI is not clean in this whatsoever, right? The FBI is really, maybe this is my opinion, but the FBI seems to be the lapdog of the CIA, which in reality it should be reversed. CIA is really only supposed to gather and find the credibility of information, right? You can't be arrested by the CIA. They have no teeth. They're just information guys. The FBI, however, has teeth. They can arrest you. They can imprison you. But it's weird, as the FBI seems to be the lapdog of the CIA. What's interesting on this discussion is I'm not yet sure where the NSA sits. I think the NSA is split, and some of them, the heads, are with the military intel, and then some of them are not. So the NSA is that big question mark I don't quite yet know about. But that's probably the biggest eye-opener to me, was I didn't realize that the military and the military intelligence is absolutely in full contradiction with the CIA. And I'm glad this war is happening now, because the CIA needs to be stamped out. They need to be shut down. Those doors need to be closed forever. We have no business doing half the stuff we're doing that agency is involved with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you have that book? You ever read that book?
No, I haven't.
If you're into that kind of stuff, that's probably one you need to put on your watch list or on Amazon or something. I forgot what I was using it for. Well, actually, I do. I remember now. I was writing a script before Seed. I was writing was going to be a movie script called The Protean Field, and it was dealing with CIA and government-sponsored mind control using cell towers to basically mind control us. And the more I went down that rabbit trail, I was like, wow. And then I got that book right there and started looking at it and seeing all kinds of other things that they were responsible for. And I'm like, man, how does this happen? It seems to be like this rogue organization that does so many things that actually affects all of us.
Talking about cell towers, it's not going to be too long before they're pushing 5G over those cell towers. I mean, we can go on to discussion about this, but
2 minutes left. But have you seen locally, because you live not too far from me, these strange-looking stubby towers that probably, I'm guessing, 12, 15 feet tall, maybe at the most? Have you seen these? They're all up and down 121.
Yes, I have. I don't know what they're for, though.
Yeah. Okay. So I went to a Potbelly's, and I was pulling out of the driveway, and there was one of those. It was installed on the corner of that parking lot, and there were some dudes working on it. So I went over there, and it was a guy who looked very foreign. I don't know if he was Arabic or what, but he was definitely a foreign nationality. And this other dude had all this high-tech equipment out, and they were doing something with it. So I asked the guy what it was, and he said it was an antenna. I said, "Was this for 5G?" He goes, No. This is not 5G. I said, "What is it?" I said, "Is this 4G?" He says, "Well, yeah, these are 4." And I'm trying to get, well, why is there one? There's one like literally every, I want to say about quarter mile. They're really close to each other. Okay. If you go down 121 from like Main Street east, it's like every quarter of a mile, right by Nebraska Furniture Mart and all the way down, just keeps going. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm seeing these pop up more and more. So I start looking into it. And I'm like, okay, this might be my next big project to try to figure out.
Are they 4G repeaters? But they don't seem to be tall enough to be.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like 10 to 12, 15 feet at the most.
Yeah. That doesn't make sense that they would be 4G. They can't be that. You think?
Yeah, I don't know. But they're popping up all over the place, and nobody else seems to know what they are. Yeah, you ask people, and they're like, I don't know.
All right, I'm going to stop a work crew next time I see one of those things being worked on. I'm going to get to the bottom with it, see what that actually is.
You'll never see anybody doing anything with them in the daytime. They put them up at night. It's like one day there's nothing there, next day there's 15 of them on the street. And any maintenance they do, they do at night. But yeah, because you're close, so just take a ride up there and check it out and see what you find out. But well, we're out of time. It's been a fun conversation.
Been a pleasure.
I appreciate you coming on tonight, Chris.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Rob. Yeah, let's do this again sometime.
For sure. And thank you guys so much for listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project. We'll see you back next Wednesday evening, 11 p.m. Central Standard Time.